Be me, Dorian. Just a regular guy, a graphic designer. I like clean lines, minimalism, things that just work without a lot of fuss. My portfolio is solid, built over years of freelancing and a couple of in-house gigs. I don't do drama. I just want to create good work, get paid, and go home. After my last contract ended, I was back on the job market. Spent a few weeks sending out applications, doing the usual corporate dance. One day, an offer pops into my inbox from a place called Aura Collective. Their website was all about progressive values, collaboration, and being on the cutting edge of marketing. Looked slick, professional. The pay was better than average, too. They called me in for an interview. The office was one of those open-plan spaces, lots of glass and white walls, with motivational posters that said things like, "Create your truth." The interview was with the head of HR and my would-be boss, the art director, Brianna. The HR guy was a standard corporate drone, smiling a little too much. Brianna was intense. Sharp haircut, expensive clothes, looked right through me. The whole interview felt less about my design skills and more about my personality. They kept using buzzwords like cultural fit and diversity of thought. I showed them my portfolio, explained my process, kept it all very professional. Brianna didn't seem impressed, just nodded along with a blank expression. I figured it was a long shot, but a week later they sent me an offer. I was surprised, but hey, a job is a job. I accepted. My first day was sometime in early spring. I remember it was still cold out. I show up, find my desk. It's in the corner of the design department's area. Brianna is there, holding a coffee mug that says Male Tears on it in fancy script. Not even kidding. She gives me a quick, unenthusiastic tour. This is the kitchen, that's the conference room, and this is the team. The team was just one other person, a younger designer named Annie. Annie looked up, gave me a nervous little wave, and then immediately looked back at her screen. The vibe was quiet, too quiet, like a library where you're afraid to breathe too loud. Brianna says they have a morning huddle, and I should join. We go into a small glass-walled room. Brianna and Annie start talking about their weekend, using inside jokes I don't get. They're laughing and chatting, and I'm just standing there. When the talk finally turns to work, it's all very vague. Brianna talks about aligning their creative energies and manifesting the client's vision. I just wanted to know what project I was on. After the meeting, she walks over to my desk and drops a folder on it. We need these assets resized for social media, all 200 of them. It was grunt work, the kind of thing you give an intern. But I figured, fine, I'm the new guy. I have to pay my dues. I put on my headphones and got to work. Finished the entire batch by the end of the day. Sent an email to Brianna letting her know it was done. No reply. The next day, I asked her what was next. She looked at me like I was an inconvenience. Told me to familiarize myself with their past campaigns. So I spent the whole day digging through old server files. This went on for the rest of the week. Me asking for work, getting assigned some menial task, and then being ignored. The whole time, Brianna and Annie were thick as thieves, always whispering, laughing together at their desks, going to lunch together. I tried to make small talk a few times. Asked Annie about a cool poster she had near her desk. She just gave a one-word answer and turned back to her computer. I felt like a ghost. My first real project came about 2 weeks in. It was a branding package for a new health food company. We had a kickoff meeting. Brianna explained her vision. It was very abstract, lots of pastels and flowing hand-drawn fonts. She said it was about capturing the divine feminine essence of nature. She asked for my thoughts. I said her idea was interesting, but I had a different take. I pulled up my own mock-ups. My concept was clean, minimalist, strong, easy-to-read font, a simple color palette, and a clear logo. I explained that in a crowded market, clarity and directness are key. The customer should know what the product is in 2 seconds. I thought I was being constructive, just offering a different professional opinion. That's what they hired me for, right? A diversity of thought. The room went completely silent. Brianna stared at my screen, then at me. Her eyes were cold. She said, "Thank you, Dorian, for explaining the basics of marketing to me. It's very male. To assume a direct approach is always the best." Annie stifled a giggle. Brianna closed my laptop. "We'll be moving forward with a more nuanced, emotionally intelligent concept." The meeting was over. After that day, things got noticeably worse. The whispers weren't so quiet anymore. I'd walk to the kitchen and hear them stop talking the moment I entered the room. I was left off email chains about the project. My tasks were relegated to cropping images and exporting files for the concepts Brianna and Annie were developing. I was a highly paid intern. I tried to talk to Brianna about it. I caught her alone one morning and asked if I had done something to offend her. I said I wanted to be a productive member of the team and felt like I was being shut out. She put on this very concerned, sympathetic face. She told me it wasn't my fault. She said that sometimes a strong male presence can be unintentionally disruptive to a safe, creative space that women have built. She explained that she and Annie were just used to a different collaborative style, and that I needed to be more mindful of the energy I was bringing into the room. It was the most insane corporate doublespeak I'd ever heard. She was telling me the problem was my gender, but in a way that made her sound like a caring manager. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and walked back to my desk. That's when I started documenting everything. I created a folder on my personal cloud drive. Every weird email, every passive-aggressive comment in our team chat, every task that was clearly beneath my skill level. I took screenshots. I wrote down dates, times, what was said. I felt like I was losing my mind, but I knew I needed a record. A few weeks later, there was another incident. The company was pitching a new campaign to a potential client. We were all supposed to contribute ideas. I spent a whole weekend working on a concept. It was a full presentation deck. Market research, user personas, mock-ups, the whole 9 yards. I was proud of it. It was solid work. Monday morning, Brianna calls a meeting to review our ideas. Annie goes first. She presents a few rough sketches. Brianna gives her glowing feedback. Then it's my turn. I start to pull up my presentation. Brianna holds up a hand. "Actually, Dorian, let's not spend too much time on this. Just give us the 1-sentence summary." I was stunned. A weekend of work reduced to 1 sentence. I tried to explain that the concept needed more context. She cut me off. "We don't have time. We need to focus on actionable ideas." So I gave her the 1-sentence summary. She just said, "Okay, thanks," and then moved on. Later that day, I saw her presenting a team concept to the higher-ups. It was her idea, with one of my key visuals dropped into her slide deck. No credit given, of course. I just sat at my desk and stared at my screen for an hour. The isolation was getting worse. I ate lunch alone at my desk every day. I put my headphones on as soon as I got in and didn't take them off until I left. It was the only way to endure the atmosphere of open hostility. Of course, my use of headphones became another point of contention. I overheard Brianna talking to a manager from another department. She was saying how difficult it was to integrate me into the team, how I was unapproachable and not a team player, how I created a cone of silence around my desk. She was painting me as the problem, and I had no way to defend myself without sounding like I was crazy. The work they gave me became more and more absurd. One time, they had me manually go through 1,000 stock photos and tag them with keywords, a job that software could do in 10 minutes. I did it without complaint. I just added it to my log. I was biding my time, updating my resume at night, applying for other jobs. But the market was slow, and I needed the paycheck. I felt trapped. The whole office dynamic was bizarre. The company prided itself on its inclusive culture. There were posters everywhere about respect and collaboration. We even had mandatory sensitivity training sessions. I sat through a 2-hour presentation on microaggressions, listening to the HR guy talk about the importance of making everyone feel welcome. The irony was suffocating. Brianna and Annie were the darlings of the office. Their little 2-person clique was seen as a powerhouse of creativity. Management loved them. They were always getting praised in company-wide meetings, and I was the weird, silent guy in the corner who nobody talked to. I started to doubt myself. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I really was giving off some kind of toxic vibe. But then I'd look at my log, the screenshots, the emails. It was all there in black and white. This wasn't in my head. This was real. The breaking point, the thing that set the final act in motion, was a huge project. The company landed a massive client, a big name in the tech world. It was an all-hands-on-deck situation. The project was to design the entire user interface for their new flagship app. This was a huge deal. It could make or break the agency for the year. A project of this scale required actual skill, not just buzzwords and abstract concepts. For the first time since I was hired, I felt a glimmer of hope. This was my chance to finally prove my worth. They couldn't sideline me on this. My UI/UX experience was one of the main reasons they'd hired me. We had a big kickoff meeting with the company's CEO. Everyone was excited, the energy was high. The project was divided into modules, and teams were assigned. Brianna, of course, was leading the design team. I braced myself for the worst, but to my surprise, she actually seemed to treat me like a professional. We had a technical discussion about wireframes and user flows. She listened to my input. It felt normal. I thought maybe this is a turning point. Maybe with the pressure of a real, important project, the office politics would fade away. I was wrong. It was just the calm before the storm. The initial phase of the project went smoothly enough. I was tasked with building the core wireframe structure. I worked late. I was meticulous. I created a clean, intuitive, and highly functional framework for the app. I presented it to the team. Even Brianna had to admit it was good. She didn't praise it, but she approved it without any passive-aggressive comments. A small victory, but I'll take it. The next phase was the visual design. This is where Brianna took over. Her concept was a choice. She was obsessed with this idea of making the interface disruptive and subversive. In practical terms, this meant ignoring every established rule of good UI design. She chose a color palette with extremely low contrast, light gray text on a slightly less light gray background. It was almost impossible to read. Her chosen font was a thin, wispy script that was completely illegible at small sizes. The navigation was a mess. Standard icons were replaced with abstract symbols that made no sense. It was a piece of art, maybe, but as a user interface for an app that thousands of people were supposed to use, it was a complete disaster. I knew I had to say something. This wasn't a subjective matter of taste, like the health food branding. This was an objective failure of function. The app would be unusable. It would fail accessibility standards. The client would be furious. I decided to approach it carefully. I waited for a moment when Annie wasn't around and asked Brianna if we could chat for a minute. We went into one of the small meeting rooms. I kept my tone calm and respectful. I started by saying that I admired her artistic vision. Then, I gently brought up my concerns. I mentioned accessibility guidelines, showing her on my phone how the low-contrast colors would be invisible to users with vision impairments. I pointed out that the navigation would lead to high user frustration and bounce rates. I framed it all as us finding a solution. How can we retain your aesthetic while making it more user-friendly? I wasn't attacking her. I was trying to prevent a catastrophe for the company and our client. Her face was unreadable as I spoke. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she gave me a tight, cold smile. I appreciate your concern for the rules, Dorian. But we're not here to make boring, predictable products. We're here to innovate. Maybe you're just not comfortable with truly forward-thinking design. She stood up. I've heard your feedback, and I'll take it under advisement. The conversation was over. I knew right then that she wasn't going to change a thing. Her ego was so tied up in this design that she couldn't see its flaws, and she saw my professional, objective critique as a personal masculine attack on her authority. I went back to my desk with a knot in my stomach. I had two choices. I could keep my mouth shut, let her present this train wreck to the client, and watch the whole project go up in flames. The company would likely lose the contract, and there would be huge fallout. Or I could go over her head. It was a massive risk. I would be painting a huge target on my back. But my professional integrity wouldn't let me just sit by and watch this happen. I spent the rest of the day thinking about it. I reviewed my secret folder of evidence. I had everything I needed to show a pattern of behavior, of my contributions being ignored or stolen. I decided I had to do it. But I had to do it the smart way, the corporate way. I wasn't going to make it a personal complaint. I was going to make it an objective, undeniable report of professional risk. I stayed late that night, long after everyone else had gone home. I composed the most carefully worded email of my life. It was addressed to Brianna, but I CC'd her boss, the head of the entire creative department, and the HR manager. The subject line was neutral: critical feedback and risk assessment for Project XUI. In the email, I laid out every single one of my concerns. I didn't use any emotional language. It was dry, factual, and clinical. I cited specific accessibility standards, WCAG guidelines, that the design violated. I included links to studies on user experience that proved why the navigation was flawed. I attached modified mock-ups showing how minor changes could drastically improve usability while retaining the core aesthetic. I ended the email by stating that as a member of the team, it was my professional duty to report any issues that could jeopardize the success of the project and the company's relationship with a key client. I read it over about 20 times. It was perfect. There was nothing in it they could twist. It wasn't an attack. It was a risk assessment. I took a deep breath, and I hit send. Then I packed up my things, went home, and barely slept a wink. I knew that the next day all hell was going to break loose. I walked into the office the next morning, and you could cut the tension with a knife. The usual morning chatter was gone. It was dead silent. Brianna and Annie were huddled at their desks, whispering furiously. They both looked up as I walked past. If looks could kill, I would have been a pile of ash on the floor. I just kept my face neutral, sat down at my desk, and opened my email. I knew it was coming. It was just a matter of when. It took about an hour. An email popped up from the HR manager. Subject: urgent meeting. Body: Dorian, please come to my office immediately. This is it. I didn't reply. I just locked my computer screen. I calmly took my favorite coffee mug and the small plant from my desk and put them in my backpack, just in case. Then I walked to the HR office on the other side of the building. When I walked in, Brianna was already there, sitting in a chair next to the HR manager's desk. She had a grim, self-satisfied look on her face, like she'd finally cornered her prey. The HR guy, let's call him Mr. Useless, looked incredibly uncomfortable. He gestured for me to sit down in the other chair, the hot seat. He started with a bunch of corporate nonsense. Dorian, thank you for coming in. We've had a serious complaint brought to our attention. I just sat there, silent, and waited. He went on, it has been reported that you have been contributing to a hostile and toxic work environment. Brianna was nodding along, her arms crossed. Mr. Useless opened a folder on his desk. Brianna has shared some documentation with us that paints a very concerning picture of your behavior. I knew exactly what was in that folder, their little Google Doc of lies. Brianna spoke up, her voice dripping with fake victimhood. It's not just one thing, it's a pattern of dismissiveness, aggression, and a refusal to collaborate. She talked about how I undermined her leadership, how I intimidated Annie with my blunt feedback, how my email from last night was a clear attempt to sabotage the project and humiliate her professionally. It was an amazing performance. She almost sounded like she believed it herself. Mr. Useless chimed in. The email you sent last night was highly inappropriate, Dorian. It was an attack on your manager, and you looped in senior leadership to cause maximum damage. I finally spoke. My voice was calm and steady. It was a professional risk assessment. Everything in that email was a factual, objective concern about the project's viability. Brianna scoffed. It was an attack. You've had a problem with female leadership since you got here. The HR guy nodded gravely. We have a zero-tolerance policy for this kind of behavior. We pride ourselves on our inclusive and safe culture. I could have laughed. A safe culture. For whom? He slid a piece of paper across the desk to me. It was a separation agreement. The company has decided to terminate your employment, effective immediately. He then explained that they were offering me a generous severance package, 2 months' pay. All I had to do was sign the paper. The paper, of course, included a non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. They wanted me to take their money and shut up forever. I picked up the paper and pretended to read it. I could feel their eyes on me. They thought they had won. They thought I was some desperate guy who would take the cash and slink away in shame. After a minute, I placed the paper back on the desk. I didn't sign it. I looked the HR manager directly in the eye. No, thank you. His smile faltered. I'm sorry? I won't be signing that, I said. Then I stood up and looked at both of them. What you're doing is wrong. It's based on lies, and it's defamatory. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. The color drained from the HR guy's face. Brianna just glared at me, her mask of victimhood replaced by pure, unfiltered hatred. I turned and walked out of the office without another word. I didn't go back to my desk. I just walked straight out the front door of the building and into the fresh air. It felt like I had been holding my breath for months. Walking away from a steady paycheck was terrifying, but being free from that place, that was priceless. The first thing I did was go home and pull out my folder of evidence. The next day, I started calling lawyers. I didn't want a generic employment lawyer. I needed someone who specialized in defamation and workplace harassment. I found a guy whose website was full of testimonials from people in situations just like mine. He was expensive, but I had savings, and I knew this was an investment in my future and my reputation. I scheduled a consultation. I went to his office with my laptop and a thick printout of my log. He was an older guy, sharp, cynical, and wore a perfectly tailored suit. He had seen it all. I spent an hour telling him the whole story, from day one. I showed him the emails, the screenshots of the chat, my performance reviews, which were all positive, ironically, and the final email that got me fired. He listened patiently, not saying a word, just taking notes. When I was done, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. He was silent for what felt like an eternity. Then he said, Dorian, in my 30 years of practicing law, I have rarely seen such a well-documented case of malicious, coordinated defamation. A wave of relief washed over me. It was the first time someone had looked at the facts and seen the truth. He told me we had a very, very strong case. He explained the process. We would file a lawsuit for defamation, wrongful termination, and creating a hostile work environment. The first step would be the discovery phase, where he could legally compel the company to turn over all their internal communications, including deleted emails and private Slack messages. He smiled. This is where they always hang themselves. The next few months were a blur of legal paperwork. My lawyer filed the suit. The company, as expected, responded by denying everything. Their high-priced corporate law firm tried to get the case dismissed. The judge said no. So we moved into discovery. My lawyer sent them a request for documents that was hundreds of pages long. He asked for everything: all of Brianna's and Annie's emails, all their Slack DMs, and, most importantly, access to the private Slack channel they had created to talk about me. Their lawyers fought it, of course. They claimed it was a violation of privacy. My lawyer argued that since it was on a company server and was used to coordinate a campaign against a fellow employee, it was fair game. The judge agreed. A few weeks later, my lawyer called me into his office. He had a massive stack of papers on his desk. "We got it," he said, with a glint in his eye. It was the complete chat log from their private channel. They called it Aura Safe Space. Reading through it was nauseating. It was worse than I ever imagined. They made fun of my clothes, my haircut, the way I ate my lunch. They twisted every single professional interaction we ever had into some kind of personal slight. There were pages and pages of them plotting how to get me fired, brainstorming things to add to their dossier. Brianna was the ringleader, and Annie was her enthusiastic cheerleader, agreeing with everything she said. It was a written record of their conspiracy, and they were stupid enough to put it all on a company server. The other golden nugget was their dossier. Under legal scrutiny, away from the sympathetic ear of the HR manager, it fell apart completely. It was just a collection of their feelings and subjective interpretations, with no factual evidence to back any of it up. My lawyer scheduled the depositions. First up was Annie. She came in with a company lawyer, looking terrified. My lawyer was a master. He was calm, polite, but relentless. He started by asking her about specific entries in the dossier. He'd read one of her claims, and then he'd show her a printout of an email I had sent that completely contradicted her story. Her story started changing. I guess I misremembered. It might have been taken out of context. Then he brought out the Slack logs. He made her read her own words out loud, words where she was mocking me, where she was agreeing with Brianna's plan to manage me out. She started crying. By the end of it, she admitted that she never personally felt threatened by me, and that she had exaggerated many of the incidents at Brianna's encouragement. It was a total demolition. Next up was Brianna. She walked in like she owned the place, arrogant, defiant. She tried to play the same role she played in the HR office, the strong female leader being attacked by a toxic male subordinate. It didn't work. My lawyer wasn't HR. He dealt with facts. He'd ask her a direct question. She'd respond with a long-winded speech about corporate synergy and safe spaces. He'd just wait until she was done, and then ask the same question again. Yes or no, Ms. Brianna's last name? He presented her with the email where I flagged the design flaws. He asked, were my concerns about accessibility standards factually correct? She tried to dodge, saying it was a matter of creative interpretation. He then produced a report from an independent expert he'd hired, confirming that her design was, in fact, unusable and violated multiple accessibility laws. Her composure started to crack. The final nail in her coffin was the Slack log. He pointed to a message where she had written, "If he questions my authority again, I'll go to HR and burn him to the ground." He asked her, "Is that what a manager in a safe and inclusive culture does?" She had no answer. She just sat there, fuming. The company's lawyers knew they were screwed. A week after the depositions, they called my lawyer with a settlement offer. It was a decent amount, more than the severance they'd offered. My lawyer told them it was an insult. They came back with a higher offer. My lawyer told them we'd see them in court. He knew we had them dead to rights, and a jury would be sympathetic to me. They panicked. The last thing they wanted was for this to go public. They came back with a final offer. It was a life-changing amount of money, enough to cover my lost wages, my legal fees, damages to my reputation, and a significant amount more for punitive damages. My lawyer advised me to take it. He said a jury might award even more, but a trial is always a risk, a bird in the hand and all that. I agreed. I didn't want revenge. I wanted justice and closure. I signed the settlement agreement. The case was over. A few weeks later, the money was in my bank account. It felt surreal. But the story doesn't end there. Even though we settled out of court, the damage was done. The big tech client from the disastrous project had heard rumors about the lawsuit. They launched their own internal review. They concluded that the design department was managed incompetently and that Brianna had ignored valid technical feedback, putting their multi-million-dollar project at risk. They pulled the contract. It was a devastating blow to the agency. That contract was supposed to be their big meal ticket for the year. Then the whispers started getting out. Someone leaked details of the lawsuit to an industry blog. The story didn't mention my name, but it described a feminist-led agency that was bankrupted by a defamation suit from a male employee they had wrongfully fired. The company's reputation was destroyed overnight. Clients started pulling away. Other employees, seeing the writing on the wall, started jumping ship. About 6 months after I was fired, Aura Collective announced it was closing its doors for good. They were bankrupt. I heard through the grapevine what happened to Brianna and Annie. Brianna's reputation was toxic. No one in the industry would touch her. She tried to rebrand herself as a freelance consultant, but it went nowhere. Annie ended up getting a junior-level job at some small, no-name company, basically starting her career over. As for me, I took some time off to decompress. I traveled a bit. Then I used a chunk of the settlement money to start my own one-man design studio. I work from home. I pick my own clients. I answer to no one but myself. My work is judged on its quality, not on my gender. I don't think about that place much anymore. But sometimes I'll see a motivational poster or hear some corporate buzzword about safe spaces, and I'll remember. And I'll be thankful that I stood up for myself. They tried to ruin my life and my reputation. In the end, they only ruined their own.